So I'm going to be talking about a recent learning tour I went on that was arranged by the CASAS program at Semilla, which is the seminary in Central America. The CASAS program earns money to support their efforts educating Central Americans in the Word of Christ by giving these tours. The CASAS goal is to promote peace through exposure to different cultures. The candle on the screen is a symbol we saw there and in many of the churches we visited. I realize that my sermon is going to be sort of a cross between a report and a sermon. I grew up with, as a pastor's child, and the missionaries all stayed in my church and my house, and so I liked listening to their stories, and so I thought it was important to tell stories. So one of the churches we visited was in a red zone in Guatemala City and was named Roca de Salvacion. You can switch pictures. That's a picture of the church. This church is representative in many ways, but also more extreme in the needs the church faced. It was formed in 1976 during a big earthquake. People built where they could into the ravine. People came from the rural areas and migrated to the city and built without permits and without any planning. In that area, there are gangs, no city services, no sewers, no electricity, no trash service. There are high rates of violence, and there are murders near the church. There are scarce economic resources. Pastor Yanet Palacios said the church will walk alongside these people in the community and show them love, spreading the gospel and she said spreading the gospel the right way has a high price. Churches in Guatemala, including this one, have a strong identity as people of peace. This pastor told us that if the church is comfortable, no one is doing anything. Pastor said that they made small changes that seemed surface but got to deeper issues and did what they could. In this community, the church works to visit the elderly, help out single mothers, and tries to provide places for children who do not have enough attention. Before COVID, they were providing a music academy for the children to have something positive to do. There were 8 different instruments that they were teaching, including the marimba. The kids needed to have a meal so that they had energy to participate in the class because most of the time the kids hadn't eaten. So they tried to provide a hot meal and breakfast. The pastor said God will provide. They said also that there were 2 orphans that came to them who didn't have education and who were looking for alternative education. In Guatemala, if you stop education for too long of a time, they'll not be accepted into any education because they become overage. The church said as they helped these orphans, they were blessed by what they learned through the needs of these orphans. In Guatemala, too, education isn't a given. Medical services are difficult to obtain for some, so the church provides first aid. The church will also train women in skills that they can use, such as making soap, flour arranging, cooking, baking, first aid. The church encourages education for everyone. They say they now have young professionals that come back to the community to support. Others just leave. There are many single women all over Guatemala. If you read Steph's blog, she talks about a moving story that we heard from a former gang member. This church truly believes in forgiveness and the transformation that can occur. And if you don't get Steph's blog, I printed out a copy. It's at the back. If you want to sign up, we can make sure that happens. You receive it through an email. We also heard from the church leaders in Alta Verapaz region in the city of Karcha, and that's where Steph and Seth are now. This is where the Kekekchi people are, and they are one of the groups of the Mayans. There are 124 churches in the Alta Verapaz region. This is also where the Bezaleel School is, and that's the school that Steph and Seth will be teaching starting in January. Right now is their break because it's when they harvest coffee, and so everybody is helping with the coffee harvest. So between the end of October and January is when their break is. The Mennonite identity helps the church growth as a viable answer to coming out of all the violence they've experienced. But the Kekekchi culture is also a factor in the church growth, I believe, as it's very community-oriented and relational. In Karcha, we were told that the Kekekchi word for hello literally means, are you happy in your heart? And they say they take the time to answer properly. We went to Metapan, El Salvador, and heard similar things as we did in Guatemala. Their current government has taken strong control and has jailed many, some unwarranted. This means that some church members like the safety that has come, but others dislike the loss of freedom. The church there is struggling with the United Vision. Despite that, we were told that there are 23 Semilla students in that area. We met a number of them. They also gave a list of community activities that they do to support and help the people and the community. Let's switch through some of this. This is the ravine that church I was talking about lives in. The church, into the ravine, and you can change pictures. This is the path. There wasn't really roads through that community, just sort of a path. And it's another picture of the same ravine where the community is. And this, I thought, illustrated some of the chaos. The electrical lines, and then this is the mural that was on the wall of the church in El Salvador. I really liked it. It means help from on high, but it made me think of some of the parables. Semilla has over 700 seminary students all over Latin America. The professors do not work full-time. They don't live there at the seminary. They specialize in different areas and are from different countries, and the classes are online. The seminary is not managed at all by North America, although it was at one point. Everywhere we went, churches were grateful for the new leaders Semilla has produced, for the students in their area, and for the continuing education classes provided that bring the pastors together for support and to learn. Semilla also provides Spanish immersion classes. They're very skilled at that. One pastor we talked with told about being grateful during the middle of COVID for a class they provided on grief, and said it really helped during that time. Guatemala is the land of eternal spring and the heart of Mayan culture. Guatemala has people who speak 25 languages from 25 different ethnic groups, 22 of which are Mayan. Racially, there are some from African descent, indigenous, mixed Spaniard, and all kinds of mixes. They all seem to be ranked in society too. 60% of Guatemalans live in poverty, 40% live in extreme poverty of less than $1 a day. There's still corruption, but now there are more services and industry and less centralized agriculture. Guatemala is a very young country with 70% of its population under the age of 30. Today, 22% of the GDP is from remittances from the USA. 8 families in Guatemala own the majority of the companies there. We heard from lots of pastors and different people at Semilla. We heard from Gilberto Flores. He told us that the original missionaries were social service and relational oriented, but were not good preachers. Many who spoke with us, though, talked lovingly of the early missionaries. Gilberto Flores said that the transition from missionaries to the local structure was like a father who loves his son. Parents need to provide a nest and wings. Mennonites came to Central America from eastern Pennsylvania, conservative churches, very conservative churches, evangelical and liberal. Gilberto Flores called this wonderful confusion. He said that they are working to break down legalism and become a living presence for the transformation of their communities. And the churches were amazing in this regard. We saw all kinds of examples. The conference there is CAMCA, C-A-M-C-A, Consulta Anabaptista Mennonita de Centroamericana. There are 10,000 church members in Guatemala and growing. The history of Guatemala plays into their situation to understand the depth of the situation there, because it seems that today they are seeing growth in part arising out of their considerable pain, struggle, and search for identity in the midst of some violent and unjust times. In 1820, the elite Spaniards in Guatemala declared their independence from the Old World. Their thinking in this was that they should do it because or else the people will, and they wanted to keep control. And it kind of worked. To this day, the Mayans are looked down on. The elites perpetuate the idea that the great Mayan empire is gone and that the Mayan people are also gone. They are not gone, they just immigrated from the lowland to the highland. If people saw the current indigenous as part of the great and ancient Mayan civilization, maybe they would have too much respect for them. Mayan civilization was never a single group, it was always diverse and dynamic. History also includes that Guatemala has had slavery of Africans 100 years before the U.S. did. The indigenous were recognized as humans at that time, unlike the Africans, but they were seen as like children. We were told that the Mayans keep some of their beliefs. They keep some of their beliefs and they bleed into their faith. When I asked more about that, we were told that they might, for example, have an animal sacrifice before building a new building, and then they would, because building involves digging into the underworld, and so then they would bury an offering to pay for the price of hurting the earth. The Mayan can offer thanks, and they are often burned offerings of thanks. Their Mayan beliefs include that humans are young and nature is older, so go to nature to ask for wisdom. And Christianity fits into this as God is a superior energy which holds us together, and Jesus is our wise older brother who brought the message. The cemeteries that we saw were fields of colorful huts on top of the ground. The dead are not buried. I brought a couple books that I bought that tell more stories of the Mayans, and they're on the back. In 1944, the Guatemalan Revolution toppled a dictator, and in the period that followed, they had democratic elections. The leaders started land reforms to take some of the land out of the hands of the 2% that owned 60% of the land. In 1952, the director of the CIA had strong ties to the United Fruit Company and spread the word during the Cold War that these efforts were communist. The CIA then supported a coup in 1954 that ended the democratic government. The internal conflict, that's what they call the violent period between the mid-70s to 1996. And during this time, the state was militarized. There was forced recruitment of civilians for the military, where they were forced into genocide of their neighbors. Many Mayans were killed, human rights violations, people were disappeared. It originated as political, not ethnic, but a rumor could kill a whole community. Let's see what picture is next. This is a picture that I took in the center of Guatemala City. We were walking around and getting a tour, and you can see there are, on the bottom, there are advertisements for people who were disappeared during the time I'm talking about here. But I thought it was interesting because above there is also signs of protest to support Palestine for now. So during this time, outside governments, like the US, but all over, picked sides. Catholics were seen as supporting the guerrillas, and so the evangelical Pentecostals were seen by some as safer. During this time, men were conscripted, and they left the country to avoid conscription. Some were taken. Women became leaders in the church. When men came back expecting things to be the same as they had been, the women hung on to their leadership. So you can see why they told us that the Mennonite church is not involved in politics there. They see themselves as Mennonites as taking a different path than the sides taken in politics. The depth of the pain from this time is difficult to understand. Gilberto Flores said that he was called to do a funeral in a community that was wiped out. He saw 38 coffins. He said he felt hate and wanted revenge. They told him that the army committed the massacre, but when he came back to his home, he found out that it was not the army, it was the guerrillas who had done this for propaganda and lied about who did it. Gilberto Flores said it was difficult to talk about nonviolence when there was always violence. Switch pictures. This is a poster from Semilla. They have advertisements, and this tells the story of Willie Hugo Perez, and he spoke with us on our tour. So we talked to him directly. He says that he was raised in a rural village in a rural village in Guatemala. He said his father raised coffee, his mother taught school. He said it was a wonderful time. But one day when he was 10, a group of soldiers came into his house. They beat and tortured his father in front of the family. They took his father away and they never saw him again. His response to this traumatic loss was deep bitterness and anger, sometimes expressed violently. He told us that his mother said he was becoming more like the people he hated, until after many years he turned to the God his mother always called him to and laid his anger down. He said God provided two communities, one Quaker and one Mennonite, that surrounded him in love, and he began the process of healing, eventually understanding and embracing the nonviolent way of Jesus and the biblical story of justice, reconciliation, of peace, the reign of God, God's kingdom, as Pastor Derek might say. These people lived through that time, and many lived through with pain and violence in their heart. The history in Guatemala was of a powerful church dictating what to do, or the church, like the Catholic Church, would tell them what to do and dictate to them. Or other churches might teach that the kingdom of God will have to wait until you have to get to heaven and you just have to live with your reality here. These people are actively learning about forgiveness and peace, about bringing the kingdom here today, doing what they can for the kingdom on earth. They are learning about forgiveness from Jesus and experiencing transformation. There is a strong identity about being a people of peace, actively showing peace, doing confrontive action about what is wrong and destroys life, working today, here and now, in whatever small way is possible for God's kingdom.